I do want to start, though, talking about the Cavs-Celtics game last night. I was in Boston for that game, and look, I don't think the NBA schedule makers anticipated Celtics-Cavs in late November being a game of the week type of event. But here we were, Cavs 15-0 coming into that game. The Celtics, the defending champs, of course. There was a lot of buzz in the building for this game, and deservedly so. And look, I went not to see what Boston can do, because we know what the Celtics can do. Even without Kristaps Porzingis, they're elite. I wanted to see what the Cavs could do, to see if like all these metrics matched up to the eyeball test. Like they're number one, I think, in offensive rating, offensive three-point shooting, point differential, a whole bunch of categories, slew of categories they're number one in. And look, in the first half, I'm like, well, looks like maybe same old Cavs. They're down 17 points at halftime. They can't make a three. Donovan Mitchell is struggling against the Celtics defense. But then in the second half, they, discovered their identity once again. And what I liked about the way that they played was they didn't dig themselves out of a 17-point hole by just getting hot from beyond the three-point line. Like, that's the easiest way for a team to get back into a game, to just get one or two guys hot from beyond the arc. That's not what they did. They played Cavaliers basketball. Like, yes, they are the number one team in the NBA in terms of three-point percentage at over 40%, but they're middle of the pack when it comes to volume. They're not a three-point chucking type of team. And they didn't get away from that identity. Like, they went to the basket. They had 60 points in the paint. Evan Mobley had a phenomenal third quarter. Donovan Mitchell had a fantastic fourth. They had the lead down to 4 with under a minute remaining. Just couldn't quite close that last gap, thanks in part to Jason Tatum, and I thought Al Horford played some great minutes for Boston. But I walked away from that game believing that this Cavs team is, for now, a clear number 2 in the Eastern Conference, ahead of Milwaukee, ahead of Philadelphia, ahead of the Knicks. I walked away thinking this Cavs team is for real. What do you think?
Yeah, I walked away with the same impressions, and I think part of this, in fairness, it's almost by deductive reasoning, because I know we'll get into this. The Philadelphia 76ers are a hot mess. They're having team meetings. The Milwaukee Bucks have underachieved, but Cleveland has shown that they're the real deal. I think the two stats that really epitomize that 15-0 start, and also what you're talking about, them, overcoming a slow start to, get down to 2 in the fourth quarter, is they have 10 players averaging at least 17 minutes a game. I mean, they have a deep rotation.
6 players averaging 10 points per game, too. It's crazy.
Yeah, that was the other stat here. They have a lot of balance, and this isn't surprising because of their talent, because of how Kenny Atkinson is as a coach, dating back to his time in Brooklyn. I mean, he's a very strong offensive mind, and he's very keen on player development and tapping into, having a well-balanced team. But to put it all together, to have basically the second best run after the Golden State Warriors 2015-16 team, I didn't necessarily see that coming. Talking to people around the league before the season started, there was an optimism that Cleveland's going to be in the mix. There was an optimism that Kenny Atkinson would be, getting off to a really good start because of his strong coaching credentials. But I don't think anyone anticipated 15-0. But to their credit, they've obviously tapped into some of the familiar that we've seen last season, with Donovan Mitchell being Donovan Mitchell. But there have been question marks that we've discussed and others have discussed about, the fit with Donovan and Darius Garland. Same thing with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And, I think that Kenny's been able to, really maximize that group chemistry pretty well.
Yeah. Let's stick with Atkinson there, because I was critical of the decision to fire JB Bickerstaff, because I thought JB Bickerstaff, having navigated that team out of the John Beilein rubble that they were in years before, and getting them to the second round of the playoffs, where they took a game off Boston before getting beat, I thought that warranted at least another go at it. Now, granted, there are other forces at play here, like locker room dynamics that maybe we're not all privy to, but he was successful. Like, you can't argue the success of that team last year. JB, by the way, doing a terrific job in Detroit. That's another story. But so I didn't like it off the bat. But Kenny Atkinson has definitely added a layer to this team that they didn't have last year. You mentioned, going deep into that bench. Like, they're playing 10 guys. Like, that doesn't usually happen. Usually you're 8, maybe 9 guys deep at the highest level in the NBA. They're playing 10 guys. You're rolling guys out there like, all right, that's Ty Jerome. Let me look up who he is and see where he came from. Sam Merrill, we've known as a legit shooter. Like, it's kind of funny watching him and Sam Hauser kind of playing against each other. It's like that Spider-Man meme to a degree, but he is a high level 3-point shooter. Karis LeVert's having a very good year. They didn't have Dean Wade last night. It's another guy that's part of their rotation. Like, they're going 10 deep with these guys, and that's not only enabling them to be successful because these guys are playing well, but you're keeping Donovan Mitchell's minutes down. He's right around 30, 31 minutes per game. Got burned out a little more last night against the Celtics, but if you can keep him, at right around 30 as opposed to where he was at 34, 35 the last couple of years, that's going to be huge. People might say, like, oh, what's 4 minutes a game? Add it up. Like, add it up over an 75 to 80 game slate for a player. That means something. It's going to keep the wear and tear off him a little bit more throughout the regular season and going into the playoffs. So I think that's big. I think the further development of Evan Mobley under Atkinson has been significant. Kenny, it's not all Golden State that Kenny's tapping into, right? Like, I was talking to some Cavs officials last night, right? Like, yeah, like it's easy to point to the years he spent with the Warriors as being his, kind of inspiration for some of the things that he does, but he pulls from everything, right? Like, he was assistant coach with the Knicks. He was assistant coach under Bud in Atlanta. He worked for Ty Lue. He's had a wealth of experience, not to mention all the European experience he had as a player and briefly as a coach. So he's pulling from a lot of different things, but Evan Mobley, kind of being that Draymond-y guy at the top of the key, for this team, and at least trying to be a 3-point shooter. Like, I watch Mobley, and nobody is as intimidating as Wembanyama, right? Like, no, you're not more aware of anybody more than Wembanyama in the NBA. But Mobley's like on that next cut, right? Like, where I watch like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum go to the basket, and where they'd ordinarily kind of go hard and attack the rim, they're pulling up and going like, oh, we got to make sure we know where Mobley is here. Mobley had a couple of blocks, contests on those guys. That was really impressive. So if he can just get a little more reliable with that 3-point shot. He missed a couple in the first half, open looks. Those are the kind of shots he needs to make for this team to take that next jump. But, his development, I think, is another tip of the cap to what Kenny is trying to do with this team. So he's been very, very good for them. No question about it.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. I mean, even dating back to Evan Mobley's rookie season, I remember JB Bickerstaff invoking, hey, the way he protects the rim, his athleticism reminds him of a young Anthony Davis. But to your point, there was a lot of learning curves last season with how he and Jared Allen can coexist and not get in each other's way. And it didn't help that Evan Mobley hadn't fully developed an outside shot yet because Jared Allen is more effective at the rim. So how do you improve that spacing? So I think that is a really huge adjustment that Kenny Atkinson's been able to do. And I think, to your point, it doesn't necessarily just have to do with Golden State. As much as he benefited from being around the Warriors culture, and I wouldn't be surprised the 10-man rotation partly reflects that because Steve Kerr believes in having a deep bench for all the reasons you outlined of having depth, preserving minutes for top guys. The Warriors hired Kenny Atkinson as a lead assistant because they felt that they would benefit from his expertise as well. So I think that he's clearly showing that he can be a great head coach, and it wasn't just, a great head coach when you're developing young players like he was in Brooklyn before Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving showed up. He can develop any sort of team, whether it's in win now mode or in a rebuilding stage.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And look, the way that the Cavs adjusted in the second half against Boston, kind of matching their physicality, matching their force, they exposed something in Boston. Like the Celtics, I know Porzingis is going to be a difference maker when he comes back, but the Celtics are not big up front. They'll play Porzingis and Horford together at times, but they prefer to go kind of Tatum, Brown, White, and Drew Holiday. The way that the Cavs attack the basket, just chipping away at every lead the Celtics built, not overreacting to, a couple of threes that Boston made. And look, defensively, the Celtics shot 53% from three. It's a great number. But the Cavs are pretty happy with the fact they held the Celtics to 41 threes right? The Celtics they averaged like 51 coming into the game. They attempted 41 in this game, which is still a big number.
It's such a funny thing to think out loud. The Celtics only shot 41 threes, but to your point, in today's NBA, they've shot a lot more.
It's crazy. They're a 50-plus average on the season, and what Kenny was saying to me and others after the game was like, we think, the way we defend, we can whittle away and chip away a few more. So if you can keep the Celtics in that like 36 threes range, even if they shoot a high percentage, they're beatable. Like, because they want to bombs away. They don't want to be shooting mid-range jump shots or even going to the basket for, contested twos. So they play again in 2 weeks. December 1st, their next game. I'm looking forward to seeing that matchup because that's going to be, I think, a ton of fun.